Hello everyone, I'm Cobert of Control on Caps and Met Group Buys, and I'm here today with a sponsored how-to video. This video is sponsored by Prevail Key Company, and today I'm going to be showing you how to lube your switches, both of the tactile and linear varieties. Before we get started, there are a few things we need to have ready before we can begin lubing. First, we need to select our lube. Here I have some of the most common lubes used for key switches. We have 205 grade 0, 3204, 3203, and 105. 205 grade 0 is the thickest lube of the bunch. I use this lube for not only switches but also for stabilizers as well. 205 grade 0 is great for linear switches particularly. You can use this on tactile switches, but it is definitely a technique for more experienced switch modders. 3204 is a nice middle ground lube. It's not as thick as 205 grade 0, so it allows for a little more wiggle room in the lubing process. It works great for linear and tactile switches alike. 3203 is the thinnest lube that I use. I use it primarily for tactiles, although it can still be used for linear switches. Finally, we have 105. 105 is an oil. We use 105 for springs only. I typically bag lube my springs, which means you take your bag with springs, put some drops of oil in it, and then shake the bag. I typically use 10 drops per 100 springs. This is the most effective way to eliminate spring ping and crunch. I'll be showing you today how to manually lube your springs though. Springs can be lubed with any type of lubricant, and especially the ones I've described so far. Some of the tools that you'll need are a good quality brush. I got this brush from Prevail Key Company. You can use either a 4-prong jeweler's grasp, we call this a stem holder, or you can use your normal pair of tweezers. I prefer to use my jeweler's prongs for lubing my stems and my tweezers for picking springs out of the bag after bag lubing, or holding the spring while I lube it manually. Either tool can be used for both though. Next, you're going to need a switch opener. The switch openers I'm using today are called Key Boss openers, but any quality opener will work. I suggest picking up an aluminum one versus a plastic one, as the plastic ones tend to break after repeated use. The lubing process is also your chance to add switch films if that's your plan. Today I have two switches to demonstrate on. I have a Halo Clear switch from Kale, which uses a Kale style opener. I also have a First Revision Alpaca switch, which uses your typical cherry style opener. Let's get started. The first thing I need to do is select which lube I'm going to use for each switch. Today, for our tactile switch, the Halo Clear, we're going to use 3203. First, we're going to select our Kale style opener. We will press our switch into the opener to release the top. We'll then separate our switch into its 4 pieces: the top housing, the stem, the spring, and the bottom housing. Those are the 4 parts of a switch. Since we're using 3203, I'm going to move these out of our way. And open our vial of 3203. We're going to start with our bottom housing. I typically like to place our bottom housing back in the switch opener. Just provides a stable place for us to work. And we're going to apply some 3203 to our brush. So, when we're lubing, there are 2 particular areas that we want to lube in the bottom housing. We want to lube each of these sliders, and we want to put a little bit of lube at the bottom of the switch. This helps hold our spring in place and eliminates ping and crunch furthermore. So we're going to start by applying 3 swipes with our brush to that rail. On the other side, we're going to apply 3 swipes with our brush. And then we're just going to make a little smiley face at the bottom to coat the bottom of our switch. And that's all we're going to do for the bottom housing. This is a step in which I like to add a switch film if I'm going to be using a film. So I like to pick up my films with the tweezers, as I feel it helps me position it correctly. With a switch film, you can see that there is a notch at the top of the film. The notch meets up with the leaf of the spring. The leaf is the copper contact in which the spring actuates on. So we're going to line that up, making sure that it's on the outside of our two housings. As you can see, we're on the outside of the two rails with our film. Next, we're going to lube our spring. To manually lube our spring, we are not going to apply any more lube to the brush. We're just going to run our brush through the spring to evenly coat the spring with lube. We place our spring back in our bottom housing, and we move on to our stem. We pick up the stem, we grasp around the top of the stem so we have access to all four sides of the stem. Now it's time to add some more lube to our brush. We're never overloading our brush. You can see that I'm using the cap of my lube to evenly distribute the lube through my brush. So we are going to apply lube to the back side of the switch, lube to the sliders, lube to the front of the switch. Now you'll notice that I'm skipping the legs. The legs are the part of the switch that juts out. In a tactile switch, this is what gives the switch its tactility. If you lube this rail right here, this leg, you will lose some of your tactility. So instead, I just lube along the sides. We're then going to place our switch back into the housing, making sure that those legs are facing the front of the switch, the top of the switch, where they align with this leaf. You can see here, they align with the leaf. Finally, we have the top housing. This is an optional step, but I prefer to lube my top switch, the top housing of my switches as well. When you lube the top housing, it dampens the upstroke of the switch. So I'm going to reapply lube evenly to my brush. You should never see any globs of lube in your brush when you are lubing. It should all be nice and evenly throughout the brush. So I'm going to apply lube to the sides where the slider of the stem will meet the top housing, the two sides, and then just a little bit in the front and the back just to guide that switch, the stem. So as you can see, we have the top and the back and the sides with just a small film of lube. Then we can place our switch back together, press until it clicks. We can test our switch to make sure it feels nice. This is the chance, if you hear any popping or any of that, to go back and adjust your lube work. You should not hear any popping once you've lubed your switch. It should just be nice and smooth. Next to our alpaca, which is a traditional cherry style switch, we are going to use my favorite 205 grade 0. We no longer need our Kale opener, as this is a typical MX style switch. You can notice a difference between the two if I bring them up. The Kale switch has a long bar, and no, it's a little difficult to see as it's clear, but there's a long bar here. Your typical cherry style openers won't work, whereas a cherry style has 2 tabs per side. And those tabs just need to be popped up. So again, we're going to orient our switch into our opener. We're going to line those tabs. We're going to press down, separate, and then pull apart our switch into its 4 pieces. So again, we have the top housing, the stem, the spring, and the bottom housing. I'm going to leave that bottom housing in. And we're going to start with our 205 grade 0. My little jar is running low, but I have plenty of backup. We have more than enough in this jar to lube probably 30 or 40 more switches, to be honest with you. So we're going to lube the exact same way. We're going to start with the sliders on the bottom housing. Nice and even, 3 swipes. 1, 2, 3, and then a loop around the bottom. Next, we're going to we're going to add our film. So, again, notch at the top. And it will be easier to see on this switch as it is a dark colored switch. So if I bring this up, you can see that the notch is at the top, fitting right in there perfectly. Next, I'm going to grab our spring. And without applying any more lube to my brush, I'm going to run the brush through my spring for a nice even coat. Next, I'm going to use my jeweler's prongs to grab my stem at the very top of the stem. And with a linear switch, as I apply my a little more lube to my brush, the difference is going to happen within these legs. Since we are looking for the smoothest possible operation of a linear switch, we're going to actually lube these legs. So what that looks like is we're going to lube this flat part, and then we're going to just run our brush lightly over these legs. And then again, proceed to the rest of the switch, applying an even coat of lube. We don't want to over lube our switch, as that can leave our switch feeling slow or gunky. We're going to take those legs of the stem, align them towards the leaf, put our spring right back, or our stem right back on the spring. Again, I'm going to lube my top housing, as I like to dampen the upstroke of my switches. So we're going to lube the sides here, right here, the top housing, the other side, and then the bottom of the switch. And we're applying just enough lube so we can see it sort of glisten, but not so much lube that we see a white film. We want to make sure that when we're using 205 grade 0, that we're not over lubing, because it can be easy to do. You want it to glisten with lube, not be caked with it. We're going to click these back into position. Sometimes it does take a little extra push when you're using films to make sure that each of those tabs are clipped in. And this is a chance if you have a pin that's slightly bent to realign that pin. So then you should just feel smooth operation of that switch. I like to test each of my switches before I move on to the next to make sure I'm happy with it and that my lube job is consistent. This has been my tutorial of lubing switches. Some key things to remember, and for a consistent lube job, some helpful hints would be to make sure that you're lubing the rails an even number of times. You want that lube to glisten and not to be coated on. You don't want to see any white on your switch or your stem. And you want to take your time. If you rush through your lube job, you can guarantee that some of your switches will feel different than the other ones. So just take your time. And if you need any of the tools that you've seen here, such as switch openers, brushes, jeweler's prongs, or stem holders, please visit Prevail Key Company. You can use the code COBERT at checkout to save 5% off, to take 5% off. There is a handy beginner's kit available on Prevail Key Company that includes a lube station, a brush, a stem holder, and now including switch openers. This is a great value It includes lube and oil for all of your lubing needs. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Discord, Cobert number 0004, or you can check out the help channel on metgroupbuys.com. Thank you to Prevail Key Company for sponsoring this tutorial video, and please come back for more helpful hints. You can check me on Twitch at Cobert or on Instagram at ControlOnCaps. You can visit my website, www.controloncaps.com, for any of your build service needs. I offer switch lubing, switch modding, and full keyboard builds, both on stream and off stream. Thank you and have a great day.